Hey, glad you're with us. Maggie, John, do you know what electric boogaloo is?
Oh, no. What is electric boogaloo?
Well, it's also known as breakdancing.
So yeah, this is interesting. They're looking at all of these potential sports for the 2020 Olympics.
I know, and then even into 2024 in Paris. So breakdancing is being considered for future Olympics along with
Do you think you could be a contender? Do you think that this breakdancing would be something that you could enter into the Olympics?
If they allow people with two left feet. I like watching it, but I ain't got rhythm. But they're also looking at skateboarding. Now, okay, I can do that.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Yeah, although as a kid, we were going down the road, you know, with a ski rope, and I went over and cut myself up. Anyway, I got up. I'm a tough guy. Climbing, that ought to be interesting. I know some guys that do climbing and have had some pretty interesting injuries. And surfing. Now, these are all very athletic, and so I understand that. I had to start to get my head around, okay, breakdancing, Olympic sport. But you know, when you think about it, young people love it. It is so popular.
Yeah. And also, it takes a lot of energy. Like, not just anybody can say, I'm going to be a breakdancer. I mean, that takes a lot of skill. And they already have breakdancing competition. So why not bring it to the Olympic stage? And
I know also what they want to do, and I think this is good. They want to help young people get interested in the Olympics.
Sounds like a great idea.
Oh, I think it's great, and you know, it's going to be fun. And anyway, karate's in, and now karate's out, and squash is not coming in. Those are two of my favorites, but I'm not making those decisions.
As long as the 100-meter run is still there, I will watch.
Yeah, and we have fast Canadians, right? Hey, we have author, advocate, Bible commentator Danielle Strickland, and Danielle will be joining us a little bit later on.
And friend to the program, podcaster, pastor, jack of all trades, Carey Nieuwhof will be joining us today with his brand new book, Didn't See It Coming. This book has convicted me so much. I posted about it. I put it on Instagram. I sat down with him a while ago. Absolutely loved my candid conversation with Carey. You're going to learn some new things about Carey that I didn't know about, that many people didn't know, but he just shares openly about things in our lives that we don't see coming, but have to be prepared for. There's so much more 100 Huntley Street to come. Stay with us.
In human language, particularly the Christian faith, the deepest and most mysterious expression of what we're waiting for is found in this amazing word, eternity. We can't get away from it. We're told in the Old Testament, God has set eternity in the human heart, in yours. Here's what Jesus said, "And this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent." Eternal life is knowing God. Jesus made this extraordinary claim, "I am the vine, you are the branches. Remain in me, abide in me, and I will abide in you." Learn to abide in Jesus when I first wake up in the morning, so I'm not filled with anxiety or fear. When I go into work, so I'm not working on my own anymore. When I interact with other people, so that when I'm with them now, it's not just me with them, it's me and Jesus with them. That's eternal life. It's waiting for you, right where you are, right now. Get to know God. Awaken to His presence in your life. Get rid of whatever's standing in between you and His love. See the world the way He sees it. Live in the peace and joy of safety in His hand. Abide in Him. God wants to have an intimate relationship with you. He's offered you an invitation. It's time for your journey to begin.
When you donate to Crossroads Ministry in your name or in honor of someone you love, you help Crossroads share God's life-giving message to people in need. And as our way of saying thank you, we'd like to send you this valuable resource that will challenge you to think about eternity in a whole new way. Call 1-800-265-3100 or go online at crossroads.ca and take the next step into your great journey to God. Request your copy today.
My next guest says he didn't see it coming. He had a successful life, marriage, and career, and then 7 of the greatest challenges any of us could ever face that none of us expect popped up and change his life forever. Welcome back to the show, Carey Nieuwhof.
It's great to be back. Good to see you again, Maggie.
I just was telling you, this book, Didn't See It Coming, came at the perfect time in my walk, in my life. This, I think, is probably the most candid I've seen you, Carey. Am I speaking correctly?
No, that's right. It's my most personal book that I've written, of the 4 that I've written. And really, it's not really an autobiography at all, but I've looked back at 2 decades of leadership for me. And then I have a heart for other people, a heart for other leaders. And as I look around, I'm like, oh my goodness, these 7 things, and there's more, but 7 made it into the book. These are the things that kind of so many people experience, but nobody really expects.
And I don't think it's just leaders. I think we all struggle through a lot of these things, no matter where you are in your life.
Well, I said to my publisher and my agent, hey, I have a church leader book I want to write. And then they got a hold of the idea in some of the early chapters, and they said, oh no, this isn't a leadership book, it's a people book. And then we thought it was a Christian book, and then we kind of realized, oh my goodness, this goes back to really, it's just a people issue. Whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, obviously, I have a bias. I think Jesus is the answer. But we hope that Christians and non-Christians alike will sort of dive into the book and look at the issues that I talk about.
So why sit down and pen this?
I was perplexed by the question of why do so many people start out so optimistically, so joyfully in life, and yet end up blindsided, almost roadkill at the side of the road. And even if you're not out, you're down. And what are these things? And so there's obvious things like, if you have an affair or steal money or engage in criminal activity, those are big ones. And they're real and they happen to people. But there are much more subtle things, things like cynicism or the emptiness of success or moral compromise that doesn't look like you're going to jail or the CRA or the IRS is chasing you. But it's real nonetheless that I think end up owning a lot of real estate in the average life. And it happens so, what's the word? It's just, it happens so surprisingly.
Yeah.
Like it sneaks up on you and you go, okay, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And that's what the book is about. How did the optimist become a cynic?
Yeah.
How come I got everything on my list, but I feel so empty? And why am I grateful, but I don't feel full? And when I looked at my own life and I looked at the lives of people I care about, these issues seem to show up again and again.
Yeah, because you can check off, I go to church, I believe in Jesus, I read my Bible every day. But there are these things that sneak up, like, as you said, cynicism. So let's list the 7 of the greatest challenges. Cynicism, compromise, disconnection, irrelevance, pride, ouch.
That's
burnout, emptiness. And so you tell how in your early years of ministry, cynicism creeped in because you gave everything to this family that was desperately in need, and they turned back not grateful but just wanting more. And that was the creep of cynicism.
Yeah, so I'm an optimist by nature, totally an optimist. And it wasn't law that really took the optimism out of me, it was ministry. So, and I mean, it happened in ministry. Ministry didn't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started at some very, very small churches north of Toronto. We started to grow almost right away. One of the first families to come in, to make a long story short, was not well-to-do. They were struggling financially, and I thought, great, we get to be the church. So I went and visited them, spent a lot of time with them. We didn't have a lot of money, but we bought them grocery cards and gift cards and gas cards, and I think one winter month we paid their heat bill or helped them do that. And they came with all kinds of emotional problems, but I'm like, hey, we're the church, like, let's make a difference. So fast forward a few years, the church isn't a handful of people, it's now hundreds of people, and we're at this event. It's like a potluck. And in the middle of the potluck lunch, the guy stands up, grabs his wife's hand, gathers up his nieces and nephews, grandkids, and announces, we're leaving the church, you don't care about us anymore. Storms out the door, and I chase him into the parking lot, just like I'm heartbroken, I'm crestfallen. And as he's getting into the car, I said to him, Roger, I'll call him Roger. I'm like, Roger, what's going on? And he said, you don't care about us anymore. It's not like the old days. And I said, with all due respect, I said, over these last 4 or 5 years, I don't think I've visited anyone more than I've visited you. I don't think we've invested more money in any family than yours. Like, I don't understand. And he said, you just don't care. He got in the car, he slammed the door, and then he drove off. and there's no happy ending to the story, you know? And something in my heart died that day. Yeah. There was something inside me that was so I mean, I was hurt. And the next time, because our church has, you know, hasn't stopped growing, we're still growing. But in that season, the next time a couple walked in the door and they reminded me of Roger and Mary, I'm like, oh, I know how this ends. And that's what cynicism does. It projects past hurt onto present and future relationships. And I found this optimist had grown into being a cynic in ministry.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. But when we return, one of the 7 greatest challenges Carrie faced was burnout. And when we return, we'll talk about one of the darkest moments in that chapter of Carrie's life. Stay with us.
And what happens with cynicism is you lose hope. And by the time I was at the end of my 30s, pushing 40, I had gone from like 95% optimist to 5% optimist and 95% cynic.
We got a great show, guys. Lots to fit in, but we're going to do it in 3, 2.
We are in the business of delivering hope every single day.
When you watch 100 Huntley Street, you're going to hear stories of transformation, great Bible teaching, people who have been changed by God, and people who are changing the world for God. Greg, your guest, amazing.
It's one of those stories you wouldn't believe until you actually hear it.
I think 100 Huntley Street is for everyone. I think everyone has gone through times of loss. Everyone is looking for hope. Everyone's looking for purpose.
100 Huntley Street is the longest running daily television show in Canada and has literally changed generations. It's a two-way experience. 100 Huntley Street is not paid for by advertisers. It's the people across Canada, partners that are giving to this ministry.
Today, I'm going to bring you a story of someone whose life was transformed while on the show.
The proof that this ministry is really making a difference is the people that we hear from.
1,200 people a day call us for prayer, and we know that they're facing the end of their marriage. We know that they're facing their kids in crisis, a mental health issue, or a job loss, financial challenges, health challenges. And they talk about how their lives are being transformed by God's love through this program.
That's really what gives us that strength to continue on.
What motivates me is the fact that Jesus has done so much in my life. And I know of friends and family who have been transformed by Jesus. This is the reason why I love being a part of this ministry, is because Jesus is the hope.
We are 100% viewer supported. We are so passionate about this media mission of bringing the message of Jesus coast to coast across Canada. We cannot do it without you. Would you please consider supporting this vital media mission? You can give online at crossroads.ca/donate or call us at 1-800-265-3100.
We are back with Carey Nieuwhof and his great new book, Didn't See It Coming, Overcoming the 7 Greatest Challenges That No One Expects and Everyone Experiences. I want to finish that cynicism portion that we were just chatting about, because I love this quote in your book. Cynics never change the world. They tell you what's wrong with it. Ouch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Expound on that.
Well, cynicism, I think, roots itself in knowledge, and that should be no surprise. Solomon actually traces it out for us in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, where he says, the greater my wisdom, the greater my sorrow, the greater my knowledge, the greater my grief. And there's, you know, the problem wasn't that I didn't know that people can hurt you. The problem was that I did know. And most of us, if you were with us before the break, you know, it's not one Roger or Mary that does it, it's 4 or 6 or 20, and you're like, that's it, I'm done with people. And so the key with the cynic is, if you're going to stay cynical, Maggie, you end up in a place where you're just like, oh, I know how this ends. Oh, you want to do something new? Let me tell you what's wrong with that. Right? You become that person. And you know everything that's wrong with the world, and you could have played the football game a lot better than the coach and the players who are on the field, even though you're eating Doritos and you haven't worked out in like a month. You know, but you're smarter than everybody and you know more, and that's a terrible way to live. And what happens with cynicism is you lose hope. And by the time I was at the end of my 30s, pushing 40, I had gone from like 95% optimist to 5% optimist and 95% cynic. And a lot of people, I think they don't know how to get out. So to make a long story short, you can get out of cynicism. And I think the antidote to cynicism ultimately is the gospel. Jesus, you know, met hate and with love. He took death and turned it into resurrection, and I think that's sort of the message. But that can almost say, great, okay, so the gospel is the antidote. That's like saying Jesus is the answer to everything, which he is, but what's more helpful? So I've developed this little hack over the last decade that's really helped me: curiosity. I've noticed that the cynical are never curious, and the curious are never cynical. And I do a lot of what you do in my life. I do a lot of question asking. And, you know, you can just be like, oh, all right, well, tell me another thing about your book, blah, blah. Or you can really be curious. And so I've discovered that the more curious I am, and the more open I am to the hope and the message of the gospel, the less cynical I become. So once a cynic, not always a cynic.
Take us to, you know, you said the hope is the gospel, but you went through a dark time.
I did.
The summer of 2006, was it? Where you were at the pinnacle of success. You're at North Point Church for a pastor. That's pretty good. You're at North Point Church, Andy Stanley's church. I love it.
Sitting in the front row,
right? You're speaking there. You're a keynote speaker, and you come back home and you just burn out.
I did. I'd had a decade of leadership, and we'd seen some tremendous growth in our church. Not what we've seen since, but you know, it was the biggest church I was ever a part of. And I had a bad formula that more people equals more hours. And more hours, because I'm a Christian, equals more faithfulness, right? How do you say no? I didn't know how to say no. And there were some emotional issues that God was working on, just some emotional intelligence, some, you know, the ancients called it sanctification, that I was working through with counselors and people. So there were a bunch of things, including just physical and emotional exhaustion, that sort of combined that led me to a burnout. And it's so weird because I was at the top of the world. We're the fastest growing church in our denomination. We were one of the top churches in our denomination. I just spoken to 2,500 leaders, you know, dream assignment at North Point. Leaders gathered from around the world, and people said I knocked it out of the park. I get back on the plane from Atlanta, land in Toronto, it's like I fell off a cliff. And that summer was the most difficult in my life. It was heartbreaking and really confusing. Because I always thought, well, the rules don't apply to me. I'm not going to burn out. People told me I was going to burn out, and I'm like, no. But the rules never apply to you until they do. And then you realize, wait, I have limits. So it was a really dark summer.
And then you got to the point where you actually thought of taking your life.
I did, yeah.
Driving into a bridge, you thought.
You know, honestly, Maggie, looking back on that, it seems surreal. It feels like that was not me, but it was me. And it's hard to talk about even now, but I imagine there's some people watching this or accessing this, and maybe, you know, they feel like the only way out is out. Like the only way to stop the pain is to end things. And that's where I got, because the pain was so deep. Just, I was exhausted. I had not grieved my losses. God was doing some stuff in me, but it was really, really painful. I had to look in the mirror for the first time in my life, because all of a sudden my life wasn't your fault and your fault and your fault and your fault. It was my fault and my responsibility, and that's just awful. And by the grace of God, I didn't own weapons, you know, and I remember, because, you know, my thought was, I'm just going to drive my car really fast, unclip my seatbelt, and drive into a cement bridge, which is perverse. And then one day I'm driving home, pull off the highway, and all of a sudden I have this clear moment, a rare clear moment. And I just remember having this thought that was like, Carrie, there's nothing wrong with you. This is all in your head. You're going home to a wife who loves you, 2 boys who adore you, a church that has your back, friends who care about you, a God who believes in you and loves you. And that didn't solve everything overnight, but it was the beginning of the turnaround. And it took me about a year to get back to the point, like even my friends, because this is how burnout hides itself sometimes. Like, you had to be pretty close to me to know what I was going through. From the outside, I had a lot of muscle memory. I could preach a pretty killer sermon. I could be really nice to you in public, but on the inside, I was dying. And I think a lot of people live that way. So it took me about a year to get back to 80% of usual, but then I realized I can't go back to normal because normal got me burned out. So I had to find a new normal. And I've been living in that new normal for over 13 years now, and it's much better.
Oh, we could talk forever, Carrie. I have
Yeah.
a million more questions. Our time is way past done. But thank
Okay.
you so much
You're welcome.
for being here today. Again, the name of the book is Didn't See It Coming, Overcoming the 7 Greatest Challenges That No One Expects and Everyone Experiences. Hey, maybe you're going through a really hard time right now, and maybe you're facing burnout. Maybe you've even thought of taking your life. Our prayer partners are amazing listeners. They are not trained counselors, but they can direct you to a trained counselor. But they would love to pray with you, encourage you, remind you that God loves you, that He is there, that He is present with you right now, even if you can't feel Him at this moment. The number's at the bottom of your screen, 1-866-273-4444, or email us, prayer@crossroads.ca. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Blasted Boston Marathon kills 3, injures 100.
We were blown forward and my body was pinned to the ground. My bones were laying next to me on the sidewalk. I couldn't see my legs because I was in a pool of my own blood. I just remember laying back and saying, God, if this is it for me, take me, but let me know that my little boy is okay.
I had a kid just really beat me up. This kid was just smashing my face nonstop. The devil just literally wanted to just kill me.
My husband started showing flu-like symptoms, and I took him to the ER, and they said, sure enough, he does have influenza A. 12 hours later, he died on our bedroom floor. It turns out that what they thought was the flu was actually an infection in his bloodstream.
There were angels all around us, and God has a bigger plan for both of our lives, because had Noah been standing up like he was supposed to be, he would have died just within the impact of the bomb.
So I came to a place whereby, God was just calling me, and I really wanted to just take my walk with God seriously. There was a change in my heart. There was a shift in my desire.
I just brought it all to him and said, I'm going to need for you to show me what to do next.
God revealed Himself even then in that chaos and that terror. He eased my mind because I knew that Noah was going to make it out of there.
But thank God, He saw me through in those times.
When you look at my story, there's so many different miracles, and there's so many times where I shouldn't have made it through.
He is faithful, and He has joined me on this journey. He's writing this story, and we're living it.
He is writing our story, and we are living it, but you may be in a place where Carrie Nieuwhof talked about earlier. Even though he had a lot of success, people were looking at him, and he was doing great in life, it appeared. But inside, he was feeling empty. He was going through burnout. I can, have experienced that myself. I went through burnout, had to take time away, get prayed for, and get some counseling. And you know what? That's not a sign of weakness. Actually, as I was told, it's a sign of strength when we admit that we need help. And that's why we have our prayer lines. There are people standing by that will just encourage you. And, maybe you need professional help. They'll be able to direct you that way as well. But call now, 1-866-273-4444. People standing by, they love to talk with you. They love God. They love you. And if you're feeling, well, I don't know if I want to talk to anybody, but I do kind of would like to have somebody praying for me, you can also email us at prayer@crossroads.ca. Again, we care for you. And the journey continues on. The story's still being written, and we believe with Jesus' help, there can be a great conclusion to your story. We'll have more of 100 Huntley Street right after this.
I'm absolutely captivated by freedom and God's design for His people to be free. All through the scriptures, there's an invitation that Jesus gives to everybody to freedom. Galatians 5:1 says, it was for freedom that Christ set us free, so be free. I'm wondering, how do we get free? How do we stay free? But also, how do we help other people get free? I'm not the only one who's wondered this. One of the first deliverers in the story of the Bible is Moses. And he's trying to set his people free. He's been interrupted by God through a burning bush. And then Moses has this argument with God. Basically, he's saying, you picked the wrong guy. I'm not the guy. I can't do this. This is too hard for me. And then finally gets to this conversation with God, this question. He says, how will I ever do this? And then God answers him very curiously. I mean, it's really almost comical. It's so funny. God says to Moses, what's in your hand? And Moses says, what in my hand? a shepherd's staff. Like, I got a shepherd's staff just like every other shepherd has a staff. Like, virtually what I have in my hand is a stick. And God says, yeah, let's use this. You know, over and over and over again, I think we're convinced that freedom's too hard, or it's too complex, or it's too difficult, or we need to kind of be like a superhero or super trained, or we need to have better qualifications. You know, Moses is a shepherd in the middle of nowhere with a stick, and God says, let's start with that. I mean, you'll know in the life of Jesus, this happens a fair bit. It's almost like God specializes in using people who are not equipped or who are ill-equipped or who the world thinks are insignificant or can't do it. He's a specialist in finding people, marry a teenage girl. I mean, his disciples, fishermen. Even more than that, you know, there's a story where he has to feed a whole bunch of people, and he says, does anybody have anything? Like, how are we going to do this? And this little boy, just a child, comes up offering what he does have, which happened to be some fish and some bread. Jesus says, oh, that'll be perfect. Now, the question is not what don't you have. The question is not how hard is it going to be. The question is how complex it is. The question is, what do you have? What's in your hand? Sometimes people have in their hand some resources. Sometimes people have in their hand some life experiences. Sometimes people have in their hand a story or a friendship or a relationship or a gift or creativity or the ability to write or the ability to sing. It doesn't really matter, because who you are and what you have is what God will use to overcome oppression and to set people free. Whatever it is that you have, it's perfect for freedom.
All right, thank you, Danielle. Oh, so practical. You know, and we live in a world, Maggie, where, you know, because of the marketing that goes on, and you got to have this, you got to have that, you know, and you watch, you know, somebody maybe in church or a great speaker or, you know, great singer. Well, I can't do that. Well, that's good that they have those gifts, but not everybody has the same gifts. And that's what I love about the uniqueness in the church, is that everybody has a part to play. So don't concentrate on what you don't have, but what has God given you.
And I think that's something that we can do better, is celebrate the diversity of gifts that God has given you. Maybe it's listening. Maybe you're a really good listener, or maybe you just can really resonate with what people are going through. You're empathetic. Those are gifts as well. And so I think we need to celebrate them. You might not be a great singer. I'm not a great singer, but I like to think that I have certain gifts that God has blessed me with. So I hope that's an encouragement to you as well. Call our prayer lines. Our prayer partners, again, would love to encourage you and remind you that you are God's and you have been given a gift today. 1-866-273-4444.
I like to sing, but in the shower. See ya.
Bye.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a member of the Canadian Council of Christian Charities. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 4M2.
Castle is the first video streaming service that's been created to serve you, with high-quality, faith-based media for all ages and a live 24/7 prayer chat. Castle features Christian TV shows, documentaries, teaching series, and kids content. Start your free 30-day trial of Castle and discover this quality Christian resource made for your entertainment and your spiritual growth. Sign up now at intothecastle.com.
Anger can lead to a hardened heart, but forgiveness can lead to freedom. The Bible encourages us not to let anger get the best of us, but let us overcome anger through forgiveness. If anger's got a hold of your heart, call our 24/7 prayer lines at 1-866-273-4444 or visit crossroads.ca/247prayer. Anytime, anywhere, we're here for you.